$8, an amount that wouldn't even buy a dozen eggs in major cities like New York City or Los Angeles. However, in Kensington, that amount of money is enough to buy a small package of a dangerous substance, the kind that can turn people into living zombies after just one use. And it's precisely because of this that after taking just a few steps down Kensington Avenue, especially at night, you'll witness a scene that even apocalyptic films would struggle to recreate. Long lines of people bent over in contorted positions, lying on the sidewalk under shared blankets with rats, or even standing like statues for hours on end. People call this Philadelphia's lawless zone, or no-go zone, a place where even the security forces sometimes feel helpless. Could this be the final warning sign for the decline of Philadelphia? Or perhaps the collapse of the entire United States? In today's video, we'll step into the heart of Kensington at night to understand what's really happening beneath the towering arches of modern America. Don't take your eyes off the video, because the truth about to be revealed could make you completely lose faith in America. Perhaps nowhere else so clearly illustrates the cruel irony of modern America as Philadelphia, the city that was once the cradle of the nation, the first capital of the United States, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and which was once a symbol of a hopeful future. And yet, just a few miles north of the historic district, Kensington Avenue paints a starkly different picture, a dark side of a nation once built on the promise of order and opportunity for all. Kensington is not the largest residential area in the city, but it contains more paradoxes than a modern metropolis. The poverty rate here is as high as 45%, and over a third of the people without stable housing in Philadelphia are believed to be living around this area. A neighborhood that was once a bustling industrial hub in the 20th century is now a place that many people only mention with averted eyes. If you ask people who have passed through here what they remember most, it probably won't be the old shops or the narrow streets, but the feeling of shock at witnessing a reality they didn't think still existed in a country considered wealthy. Many people describe Kensington at night as an apocalyptic scene. Tents pitched close together, people sleeping on the sidewalks, and the air heavy with silence. A visitor once shared that he felt as though he had just passed through a place where time had stopped, but it left nothing but emptiness behind. This situation is not happening in silence. The city has implemented various measures, from programs to support access to temporary housing, to sidewalk cleaning campaigns, in collaboration with community care teams. But no one is forced to leave, and no single solution can erase the deep layers of a problem that has existed for decades. In that picture, freedom of choice, a core American value, sometimes appears as an unexplained silence. There are people who choose to stay because they don't know where else to go. Some people because they are familiar with every alley and every street corner, the place they call home, even if it's just temporary pieces. A recent report stated that although the cleanup target areas have only about 75 permanent residents, the entire Kensington area could have as many as 700 people living in inadequate housing. And within those numbers are stories that no one tells completely. A man who once worked as a security guard for a company now sleeps in his car. A woman who once ran a small grocery store now lives quietly between two closed shops. Teenagers who wander after school with nowhere to go. It would be easy if we could just treat this as a neighborhood issue. But the more one observes, the more one realizes that Kensington is not an exception, but a mirror reflecting the cracks that exist within the very heart of modern society. That fracture didn't come from a single event, but from years of accumulated missed opportunities, declining trust, and a growing gap between those who were supported and those who were left behind. So, if a small neighborhood like Kensington can reflect the weariness of an entire dream, what awaits us elsewhere? And is this the moment to look back, not just with a compassionate eye, but with the courage to understand what is truly happening? As night falls over Kensington, Darkness is not merely the absence of light. It is the retreat of hope. Kensington Avenue, a street less than 2 miles long, suddenly feels like a lifetime to those living on the brink of existence and oblivion. Under the pale yellow streetlights, each figure silently slipped between the deserted bus stops and the piles of trash stacked shoulder high. Each step is a wordless, sad melody, following one another against the blurred backdrop between order and chaos. According to data from Crime Meter, the rate of incidents involving dangerous elements in Kensington is over 275% higher than the national average, with a resident's chance of becoming a victim being approximately 1 in 12, significantly higher than in areas considered difficult. There are roads here that the locals only travel on when absolutely necessary, and even then, they rarely go alone. Of course, it can't be said that the city is standing still. In recent years, the Philadelphia city government has launched the Kensington Community Revival Program, aimed at intervening, connecting, and rebuilding the community. Some statistics show initial results are quite positive. The rate of serious incidents decreased by approximately 44% in 2024. But when asked the people, the answer wasn't hope. It was quiet acceptance. It's not that they don't care, but that they've lived long enough to understand that a few numbers can't change the entire reality. And that's just the surface. A far more complex reality lies hidden beneath the tents along Kensington Avenue, a place where people are forced to make choices no one should have to face. In areas known as encampments, tent cities stretching from East Allegheny to Somerset, it is estimated that around 75 people reside permanently. But the number of people passing through temporarily and disappearing into the night was even higher. They don't need a map. They don't need GPS. They knew every nook and cranny, every awning, because the streets of Kensington were what they called home. Although the government tried a model called encampment resolution, not everyone understood that these piecemeal solutions were going nowhere. Those tents didn't disappear. They just shift, like smoke. Impossible to grasp, yet always present. From this avenue to the next street corner, from light to darkness, as if their presence was something society couldn't handle. So it only sought to temporarily relocate them, and then forget about them. We can clean the sidewalk, wash away the marks, and tidy up the surface. But is that any different from repainting a house that's cracked from the foundation? When each campaign is just a cycle of moving, setting up, and then moving again. Are we really solving the problem? Or are they just using piecemeal measures for temporary cover-up? The question remains, and the pain of those with no place to return to has never subsided. Perhaps what we truly need is not another cleanup campaign, but a deeper dive into the root causes of the problem. Because those tents, though crude and unstable, were still the last place they called home. Let's move on to the next part, where we look through the lens of unwilling outsiders, tourists, police, and even residents who once believed in a city that could protect them, now living as if in hell. In some cities, the issue can still be temporarily contained within a few neighborhoods, but in Kensington, all boundaries have become blurred. There is no longer a dividing line between passers-by and those living on the sidewalks, between those needing help and those who have completely given up all hope. Instead, there's a sense of underlying chaos, as if the familiar social order is being torn apart piece by piece. The lives of those trapped in that space follow a weary and silent loop. Wake up, find money, find a way to escape the physical pain, become exhausted, and then start all over again. Some people share that just $5 is enough to quench that craving for a few hours, but soon after comes a race against the impending hunger that awaits. Sadly, many of them were once people with stable jobs, served in the military, worked in finance, or were injured and prescribed legal pain medication. From that point on, the steep slope begins. When prescriptions are abruptly cut off, they seek elsewhere, and just one misstep can send them plummeting into the depths of despair. Community organisations like Prevention Point have been and continue to work tirelessly. They offer what's within reach: clean medical supplies, clothing, food, Narcan, and most importantly, the hope that someone will be willing to step out of the shadows. But what they have, manpower, budget, treatment, space, can't possibly keep up with the growing demand every day. What about the children? Children here still have to go to school, walking through neighbourhoods where the role models they look up to are collapsing in the streets. You're witnessing all these adults struggling with life and themselves. An 8-year-old boy shared that those unpleasant scenes have become a part of his childhood, and I'm already used to that. But we adults can probably also understand that no one really gets used to that image. They will be etched in memory, becoming a nurturing memory for the child, a lesson from the other side of the world they are growing up in. A world where even going to class becomes an adventurous journey through the trials of wartime. The police are still patrolling, but like many other residents, they can only do so to a certain extent. They know exactly where the safe boundaries are, and where any intervention will lead to unpredictable reactions. And when the keepers of order begin to retreat, is that order still a certainty? So, if a society can let an entire generation silently slip out of the system without anyone trying to stop them, what's to guarantee that tomorrow the same thing won't happen where we live? Kensington is not just a place for lost souls. It's also a place where many people are led, or pushed towards, by the silent movements of the very systems around them. For many years, community support organisations, law enforcement agencies, and even neighbouring cities have not spoken out about this. But those who work directly on the streets know full well Kensington has become the buffer zone of the metropolitan area, where the homeless are sent because there is no more room elsewhere, or because they don't want to contain that reality. A social worker shared, when someone is removed from the city centre for causing a disturbance or because tourist areas need to be cleaned up, in many cases they are given a bus ticket, and the name Kensington comes up as a default destination. This is not a conspiracy theory. Numerous public documents show that some cities have used out-of-boundary placement strategies, meaning they moved homeless individuals out of the city centre, even directing them to areas where support services are available. On paper, it's a way to reallocate social human resources. But in reality, it turns a struggling residential area into a container of oblivion. Kensington, a neighbourhood once steeped in industrial memories, is now burdened beyond its capacity. The new tents that sprang up were not only from the original residents who lost their jobs, but also from people coming from other districts, other states, where they had no other choice, and were pointed to as a place where they could start over. But they didn't know that here, there was hardly any starting point left. In an ironic spatial dimension, Kensington becomes the back door to an urban system that doesn't know how to handle its own collapse. Outside, people talk about humanitarian support, service transition or Manstam, the Pronstam, the inter-district system. But for those living under the tarps along Kensington Avenue, those words cannot replace a safe place to sleep, a hot meal, or a non-judgmental look. And as the homeless from other areas are moved here, the original Kensington residents are also gradually disappearing. They sold their homes, left their grocery stores, and closed the bakery that had been in their family for 3 generations, because they can no longer bear the pressure, not from the homeless, but from the feeling of being left behind, of having their former home turned into a buffer zone for other places to be cleaner. An elderly man who has lived here for 46 years said during the community meeting, "We don't need anyone to blame. We don't need anyone to promise us again. We just don't want to become the place that bears the burden of the failures of an entire system." If Kensington is truly becoming a broken boy for an entire metropolitan area, then the question to ask is, while we temporarily put the issue aside, Is it possible that the very place is suffering the consequences of our collective indifference? There's a phenomenon rarely mentioned in the news, yet evident on every quiet street, in every closed corner shop, in every window frame thick with dust. The silent retreat of residents who once believed in Kensington as a promised land. Throughout the 20th century, Kensington was once the industrial heart of Philadelphia, a place where immigrants from Ireland, Germany, and Puerto Rico chose to start their new lives. The red brick buildings, family-run tailor shops, and bakeries that line up every morning, all were once images of a down-to-earth, kind, and opportunity-filled America. But today, all that remains is emptiness. According to data from local population reports and statistics, many areas within Kensington, particularly West Kensington, have experienced significant population declines over the past decade. But the numbers aren't the most concerning part. What many people find even more heartbreaking is the composition of those who are leaving. Not the people who are homeless on the streets, but rather, they are the old working-class families, the elderly who have retired, and households with young children, people who have been connected to this neighborhood for decades. Leaving is not a rejection, it's a sign of helplessness. When the school system deteriorates, healthcare services become overburdened, crime spirals out of control, and property values plummet. People no longer have a reason to stay. And each person who leaves behind an empty house, a rotting fence, a window that is no longer lit up in the evening. Communities don't fall apart in noise, but in a chilling silence. A neighborhood once filled with the sounds of factory whistles every morning, the calls of bread vendors and children playing, now only echoes with the wind sweeping through empty eaves and the distant sirens of ambulances fading into the night. But what hurts the most is that the shadow of Kensington doesn't stand still. Because neighbouring areas like Harrogate and Port Richmond, which were once temporary refuges for the wave of inner-city migration, are also beginning to show similar signs. Declining populations, vacant homes, and an increasingly visible presence of tent camps and emergency services. That silent retreat is spreading, like an endless spiral. We used to say that the American dream begins in small neighborhoods. But if those neighborhoods are slowly disappearing, what's happening to the dream itself? Is Kensington not just the story of a declining neighborhood, but a reflection of an America facing an unprecedented question? What holds a community together when faith in the future has quietly departed? When people think of government funding, the images that often come to mind are relief packages, social programs, or budgets for community development. But in Kensington, sometimes the money poured in raises a reverse question. Are we funding the very stagnation, even the breakdown, of a neighborhood that is gradually losing its chance for recovery? That question leads to a paradox. Budgets designed to solve problems are being recycled to maintain the status quo. There is no long-term change. There is no structural conversion. It's just a temporary existence, labeled with words like short-term stability, pressure relief, or maintaining urban order. The problem isn't just about the budget. It also lies in how the budget is structured and dispersed. Many community support organizations in the region share that they are unable to access large funding sources, as funds often prioritize large models with the ability to report quickly. This leads to small groups, those working directly with the community in Kensington, being disadvantaged. Meanwhile, cleaning, sanitation, or item disposal contracts are still maintained regularly, sometimes lasting for many years. It cannot be denied that there are elements within the system working their hardest. But an unavoidable truth is, we are spending money to manage poverty, not to change it. And the difference between those two things is the distance between a community that can be revived and a community that is suspended in a state of endless waiting. When the budget increases but confidence decreases, people are forced to ask, where did the money go? And what is really being maintained with those budgets? Perhaps, in an effort to prevent the system from collapsing completely, we have accepted the trade-off of sacrificing the survival of neighborhoods like Kensington to maintain the feeling that at least things are still running. Can we save Kensington in the near future? That question, seemingly simple, carried the weight of decades of accumulation. Because Kensington is not just a rundown neighborhood, it is a symbol of a crack in the heart of American urban life, where things that seem basic, a roof, a hot meal, an evening without fear, become luxuries. When we ask the question, can Kensington be saved? What we're really asking is, can America find its compassion and ability to recover? The answer perhaps doesn't lie in an all-encompassing policy or a model urban plan. It starts with something smaller, the ability to see the people society has gotten used to turning its back on. The man sleeping under the awning of the old bakery used to be a factory worker. The woman huddled between the two bus stops used to be a nurse. The children playing next to the pile of garbage once dreamed of becoming teachers, artists, and chefs. They weren't born to live like that. They are the result of broken chains that no one had time to mend. To save Kensington, the first thing isn't cleaning the sidewalks or increasing patrols. It's restoring the human presence in policy. Not people in the form of numbers, charts, or success metrics, but individuals with stories, names, and dreams that were temporarily put on hold due to some event. That cannot be entrusted entirely to non-profit organizations, nor can we expect the government to do everything for us. It needs a network, from community groups and small businesses to the people living right next door, all asking the same question. How do we turn Kensington from a place people avoid into a place they dare to return to? The problem is, the initiatives that are actually supporting people caught in the doom loop here rarely receive adequate resources. While short-term campaigns are still prioritized in the budget because they are easy to measure effectiveness, long-term efforts, which may be slow but sustainable, are not adequately funded for expansion. This raises a very human question. Do we want to see immediate results for peace of mind, or are we willing to invest in something that can truly change even if it takes time? Saving Kensington isn't about making it disappear from the news, but rather to help this place return to the point of interest and commitment. It's about laying the first bricks for a community that has been eroded, solid housing, basic healthcare, and education that gives children hope for tomorrow. And above all, it's about attitude. We cannot accept that there are places in America that will be forever forgotten. Because if a neighborhood like Kensington is still being mentioned, it means there's still hope. And as long as there's hope, the road back might not be easy, but it's never impossible. Kensington may only be a small corner on the map of the United States, but what's happening here is a question that an entire nation is struggling to answer. Can we call ourselves a civilized society if we spend millions of dollars each year cleaning sidewalks, but can't keep a roof over the heads of those who once paid taxes? What sacred things can a country still possess when the grandparents' generation has to leave the very neighborhood they built, and the grandchildren's generation grows up without knowing what to believe in? Perhaps Kensington doesn't need a promise. Kensington needs to be seen, heard, and given a chance to be reborn through real actions. What about you? Have you ever lived near a place similar to Kensington? Do you believe a community can revive when people stop turning their backs on each other? Please leave your thoughts or stories in the comments section, because who knows, your perspective might be the missing piece needed for change. If you find what's shared today worth spreading, please like, share the video with others who are also struggling, and subscribe to the channel so we can learn together the truths that are shaping the America we will leave for future generations. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget, every view can be a step towards awakening, every story a seed of change. All information, images, and data in this video are compiled from public sources mainstream media, reputable urban reports, and community organizations. The video is analytical, exploratory, reflecting social reality with the aim of provoking reflection and positive dialogue, and is not intended to offend, stereotype, or incite any individual, organization, or community. All statements in the video are descriptive and pose open questions, and do not replace formal legal, policy, or administrative conclusions.